Hello, everyone. I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you talking about distance learning and grading. A couple of folks have reached out on different ways in which to grade in our virtual academy. What are some ideas on how to do both summative, formative, exit tickets, that type of thing? So this slide deck and this webinar, which will be available to you, will provide you with an abundance of resources. As I always say, find the one thing that works for you and start small. Start with something that you need to feel comfortable with as you move forward. One thing I do think we need to discuss and just kind of do an overview of before we start looking at the different things to consider when you're grading is that you do need to establish some grading procedures, and also keep in mind that you can't just rely on your traditional grading practices in distance learning that you always do. Distance learning should look different. It certainly feels different. It shouldn't look like what it does in a normal classroom. For example, a lot of the issues possibly that some of you have been having with choppy connections is trying to play video through your distance learning. That needs to be flipped, and the kids need to watch the video before class starts. Also, having everyone online at the same time could be an issue. So, in terms of grading, you need to consider how you're having to adjust your teaching. Otherwise, you have to adjust your grading as well. So let's go through a few items to consider with grading, and I'm going to also provide you with some examples and some places to go to look for more information. So the first thing you want to do when you're implementing summative assessment in your distance learning is that you need to realize that you don't have to assess everything. Just like in your classroom, there should be some normal face-to-face work that you would be doing with your kids, that you don't always give them a grade for every single thing they do. Same thing is going to happen with distance learning. You have to identify what are your priority standards and what standards do you really want to concentrate and what standards do you really want to assess. So if you're giving them a KWL chart or something like that, that's not necessarily something that you're going to take a grade for. And you also don't want to keep taking grades for fluff stuff, just like you wouldn't do in your face-to-face class, because then that's going to inflate your grades. So hopefully the next couple of slides will show you some examples of some different ways to assess and different ways to think a little differently with your virtual academy, your distance learning. So the main thing you need to be looking at is ways to assign performance tasks and performance items. So in a performance task, you want your kids to perform the content, to show their knowledge, their understanding, and their proficiency. So both of these are going to both of these aspects, meaning performance task and performance items, are going to require your students to have to apply their thinking. So when you're creating your lessons, you need to think about that. How can you take those performance tasks in a distance learning setting and break it down into multiple activities that you can provide to the students in smaller increments that still is concentrating on those overall performance standards that you want the students to know and understand from your class. Other things you need to think about is using conversations and oral defense. So in other words, have the students doing things where they're presenting and defending the content, defending their understanding. Flipgrid, podcasts are different ways in which you can do this. Also talking to a couple of the distance learning teachers. Some of the students are finding it very helpful when the teachers record a small snippet, either on a Flipgrid or Screencastify or something like that, and embed that into their slide that the students will have when they're working at home. So keep in mind, the students should not be just getting all of their content when you're just meeting with them face to face. You should be presenting them with content and activities that continues their learning even when they're not with you synchronously online. Leverage your technology tools. There is a lot out there. Um, you can push down your assessments and items through OnCourse now, through OnCourse Classroom, through OnCourse Connect for the kids. Videos are a great way to share with students. Also, a video, even if it's not a video you've done, maybe if it's a video you find that's educational on YouTube or on Great Minds or on Eureka Math or something like that, having that video as a reference for them to use when they're actually working out and doing homework or doing practice work is very good for them. Also, other things like Kahoot and the other tech-based activities allow you to review the students' knowledge. And in the slides to come, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Now, what we're going to talk about is obviously not inclusive. There's a lot more to it, but I wanted to give you something to start with. So let's talk about some actual assessment strategies. So the assessment strategies you see here are located on the right-hand side. So a couple of examples are informal polling, standardized testing, written response, oral presentations, skill test demonstrations, activities, group projects, portfolio, cumulative and capstone projects. So we're going to take each one of these and look at a couple of examples and give you a few more references and resources to look at. But these are some great assessment strategies for you as not only as a distance learning teacher, virtual academy teacher, but also as a face-to-face teacher, honestly. So let's talk about informal polling. Kahoot has a whole new setup for self-paced, which is absolutely great. So you can, with informal polling, what we're going to be you want to look at there is how can you gauge your students on your topic. 9 times out of 10, it's multiple choice questions. It's something like an exit ticket type of thing. But what's so great about Kahoot is we all know the kids love it. And if you click here, you can go straight to the Kahoot page. And on this Kahoot page, it tells you exactly how the kids can play their own self-paced challenges, which means they can do it asynchronously, which means they can review all of these different types of tests, prepare for a test, play games, do homework assignments. All of those items can be done here, and it even goes as far as to give you a video on how to get it started. So Kahoot, this is a good example of how you can actually start doing some informal polling. Some other ways to use informal polling is Flipgrid. Flipgrid is fantastic. Flipgrid can be used in multiple places here. That you can record a video, have them respond, they can respond back and forth to each other. There are 3 links here from Flipgrid that give you ways to ideas and thoughts and processes there. Also, if you're going to do a Flipgrid response, you might want to build a rubric, and there is a slide at the end here of this presentation where I'll give you some resources for rubrics. Rubrics are very great, very good to use on distance learning, and especially in these areas to help you. But check out Flipgrid. It's free. And it has got a million resources. I would follow Flipgrid on Twitter to get more ideas and to see how other educators are using it. But it's a great way to do an assessment without it having to be a traditional assessment test. Google Forms is another great one. So here is, a lot of us are using Google Forms. Here's a great blog about engaging students in different ways using Google Forms. And what I loved about this one, and one of the reasons why I made sure to include it, is it gives you not only the examples and what to do, but it also gives you some direction on how to get started to make these items. So check out this this link here. There are some fantastic ways that you can do assessment and evaluation with your students using Google Forms. You can also create those assessments in OnCourse classroom now, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Right here are two really great resources that I included. How to maybe use not only Kahoot, but Quiz, Quizlet, and GimKit in distance learning, kind of, and also in your face-to-face classrooms. And then the 70 e-learning activities, templates, and tutorials. We're going to go over that, and on another slide, I'll take you to that link here shortly. So, standardized testing. We have on course now. So, check with your instructional coaches at your school. You can also reach out to Stephanie. You can reach out to me, and we'll show you some of these. These are some great tips that Stephanie created on how to make assignments in your classroom to give. So assignments and assessments are basically, in our terms, interchangeable. But it's also a great way to use on course, because as you start putting those in on course, then you can start managing and monitoring your students' progress. So the standardized tests also in on course, since the kids are at home and we still are on track to taking normal testing in the spring, on course has all those tech-based assessment items so that they can do drag and drop and highlight and split screen and all that type of stuff. So here are some great resources here and quick tips. We can always create, and a lot of you have been trained on this already, but we can also help with that if you need it more. I know some of your instructional coaches are working on some of those benchmark tests for you now, and using them in on course in an assessment. The other thing is written response that I think we forget about sometimes, that this is a great assessment tool. So if you look at some of the resources I have here, you have some resources on using graphic organizers. I said this in one of the other webinars. You can actually have the students do a graphic organizer at home on paper. It doesn't have to be all done electronically. And for you to get a copy of it, all they have to do is hold it up to the camera and take an image of it to be able to send back to you on Google Classroom or on OnCourse Classroom. So check out graphic organizers. We use graphic organizers all the time to help our students face-to-face. So it would also be a great way to help with assessment on regular distance learning activities. The other great thing is these interactive notebooks. And there's a lot about these interactive notebooks on the last webinar I did on organization. It's linked on that, the slide deck we'll go back to in a minute. But I love this article because it tells you how to basically lay out and give you ideas on how to create your notebooks. But here's the thing. If you go back and you look at these links here, like if you look at our slide deck from the last Let's Talk About Distance Learning Organization, and I scroll down and I look at some of the templates that are already available for you, you can actually take the information here on how to organize it yourself and use something that's already there and created for you. So that's just a time-saving tip for you. I know our virtual academy teachers are working overtime to help our students to get organized, to get things available. These are some links and these are some things that'll help you. Also, you could give your students a digital journal and use that as an assessment and use that as a way to monitor their understanding and their knowledge of the information that you are presenting. This is another great article here on Google Slides, and it's got 20 activities that you can actually lay out. Normally, all the templates are there for you, laid out for you, but it gives you great ways to just look at things. Like here's another assessment opportunity, especially if you're a social studies teacher. Give the students an image and then have them figure out what the image is saying and put that in there, and put those in there based on like little captions, and then have that sent back to you. So these are some great ways of assessing, where you're not just assessing with the same old rote memorization test. So I really encourage y'all to take some time with this. If there's something, again, that you would like to explore further, we're here for y'all. We're here to help you with that. I just think there's so much out there. Webinars like this help you slim it down to just a few things to get started with. Oral presentations, sort of talked about that a little while ago. You can see Flipgrid is here again. Flipgrid, I highly recommend to everyone, especially for our teachers that have only seen kids virtually. So they haven't been able to build that face-to-face relationship with our kids. And this way, the kids can give you more of a time where you're posing a question to them, and then you can give them 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes to make to do their response, and then they can respond back and forth to each other. The other thing to keep in mind is, remember, we've bought Screencastify for all of you, for everybody with a WBR account, which means our students should be able to log in with their Google accounts and create their own Screencastify videos for you. Great way to assess what the kids are learning. If you have the student in front of you and their slide deck behind them, or their Google Doc behind them, and they're explaining what they actually are learning and what they know. One thing I've always been impressed about as we in our elementary schools is how quickly we start having kids stand in front of the whole class and actually start explaining and giving book reports and those types of things. There's no reason to stop that with distance learning. We still want to encourage that we are making products that are publicly consumable, that we know that we're proud to have our kids actually doing and showing out to the world online or elsewhere. Skill test and demonstration. Here's a good example, Edpuzzle. You can get 20 free videos a month with Edpuzzle. I don't think I would do more than about 20 a month. I don't think, because you don't want to make it so redundant that they get tired of doing this. But with Edpuzzle, what you can do is find that YouTube video that's educational, or one that you have made from your slide decks, pause it, and then you can throw in a question. And then you can have it as an open-ended question or as a multiple choice question. And then you actually set up a grade book, and the kids can actually go in and be assessed that way. So that's a good way of using that flipped concept of the video and making sure the students are actually watching that video. Activities are another great way to assess students. Remember, all the work the students do in distance learning does not have to be in front of you. So you just need to organize ways for the kids to actually have work to do and interact with the content. For example, a hyperdoc is a great way of doing that. Hyperdocs are very interactive worksheets, if you want to put it simply. Here are a bunch of quick ideas on how to use them. And it's really, really good for you for the different topics that you're teaching, because you can use this for any grade level. And then what you can do is actually have them turn that in for an assessment for you. Here's some novel hyperdocs already done. Remember, we talked about choice boards in our last Let's Talk About Distance Learning organization, and we'll talk about choice boards a little bit more when we talk about engagement in a couple of weeks. But notice, here's an example of how to do choice boards. So basically what your choice board is doing is you are actually providing the students with a choice on what they want to be able to do. So you have, for example, look up here. Choose 2 activities from each row, 1 through 4. Choose 1 activity from column A or B and 1 on column C or D. So then the kids feel like they have student choice. They feel as though they are having some say in what they're doing, but you are still directing them to the content that you want them to know. So those are activities. Those would be probably rubric based as well, laid out for the kids to have some way of doing their activities and knowing what you want them to do. Group projects are still not out of the picture in distance learning. You just have to rethink it a little bit. One way is to do your breakout rooms with Google Meet. This is a template for the breakout room that actually was in our last webinar. I know we just updated Google Meet for everyone, and they have some new things coming out in another week or so that I think is going to help with Google Meet. The only thing I would throw in there as well on some of these group projects and breakout rooms is what's good about this template is it has the kids record their notes so that because you can't be in every room the whole time. So that way you get a feel for what's going on in that room, and they have to produce some kind of information for you that you could then use as part of a rubric and an assessment. Portfolios, cumulative capstone projects are absolutely great. We did an entire webinar on that, on project-based learning, and here's all the links for that recording and for that information. We did that over the summer. We also have a lot of our schools using, especially at the elementary, Seesaw. Those are great for portfolios. I would also direct you back to the organization webinar that I linked in the earlier slides, because those templates are set out for you already. And so the students could actually use those portfolios and use those templates to gather the data, and then you can assess with a rubric. So a few things and a few tips to keep in mind. You really want to make sure you're involving your learners as much as possible. That does not mean it all has to be synchronous. Your learners can still be active in an asynchronous format. You can do that through your self-paced Kahoots. You can do that through your Flipgrid. You can still build your relationships and your communities in a distance learning setting. Don't look at your testing and assessment as a way to just catch those kids. Those kids aren't doing this. Those kids aren't doing that. If you were doing nothing but rote memorization stuff all day long and submitting it, you might also feel that way, that you just don't want to do it. So if you actually give them more activities, some projects to do, some hyperdocs, some things like that. And here's the thing, guys, there's a lot out there that's already created. So no one's telling you have to recreate the wheel on some of these hyperdocs. If you need a hyperdoc about the plant life cycle, Google plant life cycle and the grade level hyperdoc. And I guarantee you there's a community of teachers out there that is that just give and help others. And you don't have to go to Teachers Pay Teachers and spend $2 on something, because I guarantee you it's there for free. Build ways for your learners to provide feedback. I'm going to say it again. You're going to get tired of me hearing Flipgrid. Flipgrid is a great way to push kids into giving feedback. Also, digital journals are another great way to do that. Have the kids actually create their own journal. And keep your lines of communication open with your learners. Do you have a Padlet where they can ask questions? Different things like that. We are actually going to talk about communication this coming week on Thursday night. That's our topic on Let's Talk About Distance Learning. It's going to be on communication. On Course has a lot of great ways to communicate back and forth with your parents and with your students. So I think a lot of these little tips and tricks will certainly help you to be less stressed as a distance learning teacher, as our virtual academy teacher, just because I know that this is a huge thing that all of you are taking on, and we greatly appreciate what you're doing. So, one thing I think to just kind of start to wrap things up is I think rubrics is something that you really embrace in your classrooms, but I think you also need to start embracing them in your distance learning areas. So, these first two links are a lot of really great ways to make some rubrics for yourself really quickly. Here's a participation rubric that I just love that I found Googling, and it's from a school up north, and this is their participation rubric for remote learning. So a lot of you have been struggling with, instead of just giving them points for completing a KWL, have your participation based upon a rubric. Have it based upon something. You could take this one and tweak it to fit your needs. But notice what it's doing. It's talking about chats. It's talking about how many times a week they're participating. You could add Flipgrid to that. You can add a lot of these items to your participation rubric, which then gives the students a clear cut explanation of exactly what your expectations are. So I think there's a lot that we still are learning about distance education. A lot we're still learning as we go through the virtual academy and learn as we go. I think hopefully these little short webinars are giving you resources and help. One thing we can do as a tech department, contact me or Stephanie. We can arrange either a virtual conversation amongst teachers across grade levels to try to help out and organize some of these items and share. Because there's really no reason for everybody to be recreating the wheel if we're all teaching the same thing. So as always, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any other specific topics that you would like to cover, our next 3 webinars are on communication, engagement, and success stories with distance learning. But this was an actual topic that Miss Major contacted me about yesterday. So I put together a quick webinar on that. So if there's another topic, please reach out. All I can tell you is we will do the best that we can to find the information that you need to help you with and give you some assistance. So stay strong, guys. Y'all are doing a fantastic job, and we really appreciate you. Thank you.